Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me this week is John Spadafora, CEO of Flower Union. Thank you very much for joining me today, John.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. John, I always like to start the podcast with a little bit of background. So could you tell me how you found yourself coming to the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I had quite the journey to cannabis. I moved back to Denver in 2014. My youngest daughter had some health issues that we decided we wanted to actually try CBD for. And it was before it was really widely available and understood across the country. And I was living in Las Vegas. I had a hospitality company that was pretty successful. I was doing a lot of traveling, and we realized that the only way we were going to be able to exercise that option of trying plant medicine for my daughter was to be here around where the doctors had the product. So moved back to Denver in 2014. Shortly after I moved here, I ran into an old college friend just on the streets. He had made an investment into what was at the time the first recreational wholesale flower company in the country. It was the first Colorado recreational grow license that was not attached to a store. And it was very, very, very early. Like legal sales had just started. We started catching up on a lot of things. I was very excited to be back in a world where there was legal cannabis and you could go into stores and see all these amazing products, and was really surprised. The quality from grower to grower was really uniquely different. And as a consumer, there was really no way to differentiate because people weren't branding anything. That had happened right before I ran into Toby. And so the conversation we talked about that for a minute. My background had been in hospitality, specifically bars and nightclubs and hotels, and had spent a lot of time around some big alcohol companies. And that kind of led itself to a side project, which was at first creating the brand and marketing plan for their company. Eventually came in and was asked to run sales and marketing for them. And I did that as kind of a side project to start. And then 2020, right before the world shut down for hospitality, I decided that I really loved the opportunity. Didn't know COVID was coming, got rid of my hospitality interest and jumped both feet into cannabis. So I spent 9 years with Veritas. I built the brand, I built the sales and marketing team. As the world got more challenging, and that was a brand and a company that hadn't really been built for a time when the cost of production would be one of the more important conversations. Investors worked with the investors to try and right this ship, but it was just too late at that point in time. But was really in love with cannabis. I'd fallen in love with the plant and what it could do. Had seen it help a lot of people, my daughter included, and also found that it was just a very positive addition to my life. So now I'm fully into cannabis full time.
So you got out of the hospitality industry just before COVID?
Complete luck of the draw. I had a great partner. We had a couple of really cool projects. He's still involved with a few of them. We had the biggest one we did. There was a property on the strip that was outside of a nightclub that we redesigned into a very cool kind of consumer-friendly park area that now does 20 some million a year in sales. And yeah, it was great. I had some really cool gigs. I was one of my clients was Virgin Hotels. I was in charge of working with them to develop a lounge concept for each city. They wanted each city to feel authentic to the city. And so I was traveling around the country to the places they were building Virgins, and literally my job was to experience the scene, go eat everywhere, drink everywhere. And I wasn't loving it anymore. And I was kind of becoming work. And I'm like, this is the pinnacle of this job. It doesn't get better than this. Like, I'm on someone else's dime. They trust my intuition and they want me to help them build something. And I was no longer finding it to be something I love doing anymore. And so I talked to my partner and said, look, I think I really need to give all of my energy to cannabis. I want to put it all in here. I want to stop traveling as much as I'm traveling. So just by complete luck of the draw, my hospitality interest ended at the end of 2019, and I left that company. And then obviously COVID started 2 months later. So I felt a little guilty at that time because cannabis rocket shipped and hospitality went the other way. But he did great. He's still doing very, very well. And I think navigated those changes. And it was a really positive change for me.
Could you share what you're trying to treat with your daughter and whether or not
Sure. Yeah, sure. So my daughter at the time had an undiagnosed condition. We had lived in Vegas. She was born in Las Vegas, so we've been there the whole time. And we found that Las Vegas was a location that didn't have a lot of medical care that really was targeted towards what she needed. Specifically at the time, she had severely developmental delayed on a couple of levels. But most concerning was that she was having significant seizures, mostly nocturnal. There were every night, 3 to 4 to 5 seizures. That was very tough on her. It was very tough on my wife and I because you never sleep the whole night. And so at that point in time, we were seeing a medical team. We were actually flying to LA for medical care. And we had gotten through the run of pharmaceutical treatment options because they weren't able to really pinpoint where the seizure was starting or the type of seizure. They were so very different. So at that time, the doctor suggested a few things. He suggested a surgery, which he was not really a big fan of. He suggested a experimental medication that he was a fan of, and it was right after the Sanjay Gupta CNN special where he went on and they talked about Charlotte's Web. My wife had seen that, and she asked him, said, "Well, what about CBD?" And he said, the hospital would prefer I don't recommend it, but if it was my child, I would try the experimental medication. If that doesn't work, I would try CBD. That's certainly providing relief for a lot of people. So we moved here. She was diagnosed about 3 years later, maybe 4 years later, and it's a very rare genetic condition called GNAO1, and it's basically a mutation of that gene. She was the 56th person who was discovered with that in the world. It's just like genetic testing is such a challenging field. I think now they're up to just under 300 people worldwide who have it. So yeah, it's been quite the journey to navigate, a medical condition that it's hard to treat something when you don't know what it is. And you can see the symptoms, but you can't necessarily understand the root causes. We were able to actually bring her a significant amount of relief. We were not able to abandon the pharmaceuticals, but adding CBD to the regimen in a really controlled way. Once we got here, we were able to get those seizures under control, and they're still very much under control. She'll have them occasionally. We're down to maybe call it 2 or 3 a month, as opposed to what was 5 or 6 a night, which is, a significant improvement.
After you saw that positive impact on your daughter, did that ramp up sort of your commitment to the industry?
I think that on some level, to see the medicine actually help someone when so many other things had not been able to do so, was really eye-opening for me. And I think it was also an exciting time to be getting involved in cannabis because there was so much excitement around the plant. And you were seeing, patients with Rick Simpson oil. I had an aunt who had pretty severe, late stage breast cancer that was not treatable at this point in time. And she had decided to forego the traditional treatments. Cannabis brought her pain relief and kept her lucid during that last year and a half of her life. So there were a couple of different instances where I was able to see that this was more than just something fun. My relationship with cannabis at that point in time, I was a pretty heavy stoner in college. I used to wake up with the bong rip and go to bed with the bong rip and all those fun things, but I'd never seen it really used medically. And I have to be honest, as I was first reading about this, it was hard for me to get my head around how something that I had known as a fun tool or a relaxed tool could be a medicine. But, Avery's experience really opened my eyes to that. And then I started seeing others around them. And then as Veritas grew, we would have customers and patients on the medical side who would reach out and say, "Hey, I'm looking for this strain because it does this for me," and really started to learn that, when you know what's in the cannabis and when you understand the terpene content, you understand what works for you. Cannabis can be an amazing and beautiful tool. We saw phenomenal results with my daughter. Thankfully we're still seeing them, and it really opened my eyes to the fact that there's a huge audience for this, and this is a plant that helps people. So yeah, it definitely inspired me and got me more excited about the product. I think, obviously, the majority of our sales and the majority of our customer touches were on the recreational side, and they still are. But, knowing that whether something severe like what my daughter was dealing with, or, you or I just going through and having our dose of relaxation that maybe didn't come in the form of a glass of whiskey, I really started noticing benefits for a lot of people in a lot of instances. It was a pretty magical time.
So at what point did you decide to start Flower Union?
So as we went through, with Veritas was a phenomenal product that, we were the largest premium cultivator in the state for many, many, many years by store count, by distribution. We had an amazing audience of consumers that fell in love with the brand. And shutting that company down was really challenging and something that took a big toll on us. We really wanted to do it in a way, once we realized that was the road we had to go, we wanted to be respectful of the team that we'd built, the contributions they had made. Really, I think it was an industry that had made some bad decisions when estimating the size of the market and how we were going to get through that. And we missed a bunch of things. We all missed that COVID was driving us up. We all missed that, demand specifically in Colorado was higher based on not a lot of other legal states. And there's other states legalized. We've seen that follow quite a bit. So as we shut down Veritas, I had been in love with the plant. I'd seen it help my daughter. I had spent a lot of time in gardens and really started to appreciate the craft of developing and maximizing terpenes and creating a product that was really special and unique. And I had been given a sample of an early iteration of this technology at MJ Biz a few years ago by Kim Rial, the CEO of Azuka. And it was an amazing product in that I think there's a lot of new things that come to market in cannabis that are gimmicky. Part of what we saw early on in those days was that there was so much interest in cannabis that everybody came out with these great products, and many of them were not great. And there was a kind of this pullback on a lot of levels from a CBD perspective. When I really started looking and said, okay, well, what's my next move? We've shut down this cultivator. This was something that, we had visions of being one of the top cultivators in the country. We thought that was the path we were on. We had a really great audience base. We had a really unique perspective. And we started thinking about different products. And I realized that, this sample that Azuka had put together was a different delivery vehicle for the plant medicine that we've been putting out as Veritas. And so then started putting more time and energy into it, spoke to one of my investors who's a very good friend that was in Veritas. And he was one of the early people who really loved that sample and felt like it provided a different perspective on an edible. He did not want to be he doesn't combust a lot, doesn't like smoking, and was more but enjoys cannabis and enjoys the effects that you get from it. So reached out to Kim and said, hey, thinking about doing this, what do you think? They were still in a spot where they were trying to figure out the right way to bring the product to market and connect with the audience. I think everybody understood the technology is transformative. I really do believe this is a disruptive product that you're going to see in a lot of markets soon, and we're excited to go on this path. So when we sat down after the Veritas experience, we said, well, what do we want to do differently? How are we going to build this to be a company that is prepared for the stuff we aren't prepared for? With Veritas, we were growing weed. I make the joke, we were the happy hippies in Boulder. We were growing big outdoor plants indoors that were beautiful when they had unlimited amount of labor and they had unlimited amount of nutrients, and we could just give them what they wanted. And cultivation had evolved to a place where technology really drives that game more than anything. Obviously, the plant's very important, and the people who are doing great work still have that affinity for the plant and they care about it. But you're getting away from the days of, you and I making the right decision when we hand water a plant. And you're now getting to a spot where you're letting science lead that process. For us to go through and make the changes that were going to be necessary at Veritas was going to be absurdly expensive. And it would have been in a market that we're still seeing go down from a price perspective. So when we decided to start Flower Union, we really took into account a lot of the difficult lessons we learned with Veritas. We are working with great co-manufacturing partners in different states because that allows us to be much more nimble. We've got a much smaller but much more focused team that's really, really driven on the mission of what we're doing to create. So Flower Union was started and created because we felt that we'd identified a opportunity that didn't exist. When you look at the edible market, there's some really great products out there. There's some really unique products. I would make the argument there's not been a lot of new products in a long time. It's a lot of iterations of the same thing, some different form factors. Obviously, fast onset has become a big product and an important part of the process. Really started doing a lot of research and talking to my friends and the influencers we knew and some of our customers, both in the dispensary world and in the consumer world. And we realized that there were a lot of people who did not like the edible experience. I made this analogy today. It's like edibles are the easiest way to experience cannabis, right? You don't have to roll anything. You don't have to break something down. You don't need a blowtorch. You're not going to create a smell. But then it's like taking someone who's learning to cook and you're giving them one of those gigantic Japanese break the bone knives. And you're saying, please dice this onion. It's the most challenging high you can get. It's unpredictable. It takes you in a really unique place. And I met a lot of people who were very heavy cannabis consumers who did not enjoy edibles for that reason. They didn't like the unpredictable nature of them. I consume a lot of cannabis. I dab frequently. I smoke a lot of joints. I eat an edible or two. I wake up the next morning and I feel a little groggy and hungover. And you got that kind of cannabis stupids that come with it. So when we looked at what Azuka had created with their time infusion technology, and the idea of pairing that with what I think is the most pure expression of the plant, which is flower. It's been unadulterated, unmodified. While I love hash, that process does convert some of the terps. You lose some things. And we started realizing that this process not only allowed you to experience the cannabis in a unique way, but also to give somebody a experience that's very predictable, very consistent, and sessionable. It's not going to, you're no longer trying to learn to cook with the largest knife on the rack. You're now getting into a situation where this is a predictable, sessionable high. And when we took all those into account and we realized that, the edible consumer, I think, is the largest consumer base because it's the easiest thing to touch, and that we truly had a unique and different perspective on it. And we just need to figure out the P's and Q's of how to do it right every time. I spoke with our investor and he was like, this is an opportunity to really do something special and to bring a product to market that a lot of people need and want. They may not know this is specifically what they want, but it addresses a lot of the concerns that consumers have with edibles. So, it was really driven by Scott. Scott inspired me to get going with it. And we formed the company late summer, just after shutting down Veritas, and got to work right away on formulation and getting that through. Candidly, I kind of came to market a little early. I was excited about what we were doing. And the product wasn't perfect, but I think we perfected it late November, early December, and we've seen great success since then.
I had a very similar reaction the first time I tried an Azuka edible. I was just like, oh, this is it.
It's mind-blowing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I contend that is the best edible that I've ever had.
Well, it is, and they're great partners too. And I think one thing that was really, going through the Veritas experiment, it was a phenomenal, incredibly fun ride that was really based on what we knew and how could we share with what we knew. And part of what I felt I needed to create as I went for this version 2 of my ride in cannabis was that we wanted to get into a company where we were surrounding ourselves with people who knew the things we didn't know. And Azuka is such an amazing partner, and really the technology they've created that allows the cannabinoids to become water soluble is game changing. If you think of the other fast onset methods, there's concerns around nano. I have concerns around nano. The particle size that's being used in these edibles in America wouldn't be allowed for consumption in Europe. And that's a big red flag for me. It might mean nothing. It might mean something horrible down the road. And, the traditional edible experience with the cannabinoids bonded to a fat, it's just that you can't influence that. Your body does that the way it does it. And it creates that very lethargic high, which is good for certain purposes, but doesn't give you, I love the beauty of smoking a joint and being at a concert with friends and everyone's just light and giggly and you become part of the music, or, hitting a joint on the chairlift and just, skiing by myself and getting that kind of like becoming one with nature and just like letting myself go. And this edible and this Azuka technology and the fact that it's water soluble and that we're able to play with different strains and really acknowledge the work that the cultivators did and experience those strains like you combusted is, again, I think it's a game-changing technology. I feel like, our mission is to share this with everybody because I think this is what you wanted. When your average customer went to the store and bought an edible, this is what they wanted. They wanted to experience cannabis in an easy way. They wanted to experience cannabis in a discreet way. So it's incredible. I mean, I'm excited. You can tell I go on and on about it, but it's Azuka did some great stuff. And I love too that they are really focused on being what they are and finding partners to fill those gaps, where I don't have an R&D department and they're some of the smartest people I've ever met when I go to their facility in Albuquerque. They're also very welcoming and fun and happy to share and, excited about what our team is able to do because we bring a different skill set. So they've been a phenomenal partner and we're really excited to work with them.
Well, and I just like the ability to taste the strain.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I've been describing our gummy, what we came to market with first is a strain specific gummy that's got no added flavors, no added colors. So it's the terpenes, the flavonoids, and the cannabinoids that are driving not only the experience, but also the flavor. And I'm a big beer fan. I love to go and drink an IPA. I love the uniqueness of the hop and the bitterness of the hop and all the crazy flavor that great brewers are able to pull out of that. In my opinion, this gummy is very much the IPA of cannabis, where you go through, there's literally some that taste like papaya because it's got very tropical terps. There's nothing added to it. There's some that taste like citrus. There's some that taste like kush. And to go through and really experience these and have that like, oh my God, this is consistent with smoking the plant. I think is incredibly unique. And that's why we're so excited. I mean, the Azuka's and established in the market. People know Azuka. They understand that their fast acting is consistent and will do what it's supposed to do. So to apply that technology to what I think is the purest expression of the plant has been incredibly exciting. And being able to share those crazy unique flavors. There's one of my favorite parts of the Veritas experience. We brought an investor in who was a founder of one of the larger microbreweries that's now got 3 locations around the country, and they're available in every state, and you know them, right? And so we did a tour with our head grower and their master brewer. And I hadn't realized, as big of a beer nerd as I had been, that hops derive their flavor from terpenes. But learned that on that experiment. We were able to do a really cool collaboration that year for 420, where we added, they brewed a beer with the same terp profile as a couple of our strains, and they were able to find hops that matched it really 1-to-1. They brewed a beer that smelled and tasted like weed, and they tested it all 3 tap rooms, and it was insanely successful. It actually was going to become a Veritas branded national beer that was going to be part of their release they have everywhere, until the founder who had invested with us sold the rest of his shares, and the company that bought them said, I'm not sure I want to touch cannabis. But for me, there was just this amazing 1-to-1 moment of, oh my God, there's this huge audience of people who love these products, beer. And, as Americans, we see a transition away from alcohol, and people are, all of us, myself, I'm trying to be healthier. I'm trying to drink less beer and trying to do less of those things. And you can get those same flavors and experience, but then in a cleaner, healthier way. That was a really eureka moment for me with Veritas, and something that we were able to use to inspire these products we're putting out on the flower union side.
Do you license the technology?
So yeah, the way that our product works, we own it. I'm sorry, we work with Azuka. Azuka developed the technology, but we have the rights to it, and we go and work with co-manufacturers in each location to be able to execute our formulation and our product. We put boots on the ground marketing support. But we're really leveraging the existing facilities. Back to the Veritas experiment, it was great until it wasn't. And when it wasn't, we had 145 employees and 100,000 square feet of facilities. And when the market fell, that was crazy expensive and very difficult to remove those expenses. And so when we started Flower Union, we wanted to take into account that, look, to achieve the potential of this product, we plan to be in every state at some point in the not too distant future. And when you look at the capital expenditure to go through and do that, of having your own facilities versus working with existing operators, there was really no contest on that one.
When you're working with co-packers and different people across the U.S., how do you make sure that you do get it right every time?
Sure. Well, that's a great question that I hope we have the answer to. We're getting our second state spun up now. But I think it really comes down to having a clear vision of what we're trying to do and understanding those key points of it. We've got a great process we're very comfortable with. Myself and another gentleman who's our director of operations are really there working with our partners on a daily basis to say, whether that's working through the process of production or R&D or quality control. I'll tell you that one of the most important components of this product is the quality of the input weed as it comes in. And, we're not using trim, we're using cured A buds, the same things that go in jars, and depending on the market, might be $50 to $80 per an eighth. Every batch of flower that we're buying to go in right now is being bought by either myself or our director of ops. And I think at some point as we expand, we'll start to share that responsibility. But we're going to go through and get people certified as ganjiers so that we can say it's not just, David knows what he likes, but he understands the plant and he understands what's great about it. We don't just go and we're not buying the cheapest flower. The New Jersey startup, I worked with our partners. They got us tours. I flew to Jersey and we went and looked at a whole bunch of gardens. And we talked to the cultivators and we talked about their process and their style and their approach to genetics and, their nutrients and everything that's important, their cure time and their cure style. And we really look to find people who align with our values and who align with our desire to do it right every time. So, as we spin up, I think that finding great partners is number one. That's another thing I've learned through cannabis. There's some really great people in here who are not just here to make a quick buck or not just here to kind of capitalize on being part of something new. That's everybody's involved with the money. Everybody wants to be part of the fun run up, but there's people who love this plant, and that's something we look for. We go to these cultivators and we're not saying, what's the best deal I can get? We're saying, what's the most exciting thing? When you go through your garden, what do you get excited about? When you put this out to stores, what do the stores get excited about? What flavors are you creating that are unique? So I think as long as we maintain that adherence to best ingredients and best product and consistent processes, I think we're going to be good. As we grow, it really comes down to treating people like partners, and we don't call them co-packers. We call them our partner. And we want to talk about what goes well. We want to talk more importantly about the things that don't go well, so we can work through those. The process of creating this gummy was a really challenging one for us because unlike other edibles, where you're starting with a flavor and a concentrated base of something that you just mix to get to where you want to go, and that's oversimplifying. I'm not minimizing what anyone else is doing. We're starting with potency of flower and then dividing it. We're adding water and azuca to it, and then we're adding unflavored pectin to it. And so it's really critical that when you go in there, you go in with intention, knowing what terps you're going after, knowing that you're trying to express that plant in the same way that you would if we were breaking it up and rolling a joint while we're having this conversation. And I think as long as we can keep that commitment to really high quality and to people who are looking to connect with a wide audience, have a great knowledge about cannabis, but not that approach of being the world's worst sommelier who makes you feel bad for not knowing what you don't know. I always love, from my hospitality experience, I love working with somms who felt like it was their job to introduce you to their favorite things and pique your interest. One thing we've learned as we've gone through this product is that when the consumer knows what they're putting in their mouth, they really appreciate the nuance of flavor. People love, like, oh my God, I can taste citrus, or I can taste pine, or I can taste these different things. So we're actually just about to launch a label redo that starts to include, from my alcohol days, I knew that I could sell you tequila if I shared the experience. I made you part of the party. If I wanted you to buy something other than what you knew, sharing some of those unique taste words where you might taste something like, yeah, I do get burnt orange, or I do taste like a raw agave, or whatever those are. And then you become part of the party. And you're like, and I also taste XYZ. So we're really trying to incorporate that into the product so that the consumer is educated and becomes part of that process. And we found that I think it's just an adherence to giving a shit, right? At the end of the day, caring about every product, not putting things out we don't like is how we're going to keep this consistent and great.
Did you have any trouble on that search looking for cultivation partners that matched your values and that commitment to getting it right every time?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously there's different things that drive different people. So I do believe that's where my background in cultivation has been very helpful, because I understand the process, right? I understand the corners that people cut. I understand the things that are important. And I've found that when I have these conversations with cultivators, it becomes something where they're very excited that those are the things we care about, because those are the things that are important to them. And so it's not too long into the tour that it becomes very easy to understand who the right partners are going to be. One thing that's really exciting in Colorado, we started with 3 great partners that, really excited about the 3 we're working with. We've added a 4th one. There'll be the next production partner. And we're now starting to get cultivators reaching out to us and saying, hey, this is really cool. I'd love you to look at my gear. And that's what this is about. I see this as an opportunity to collaborate with some of the most unique and best in the industry and to showcase what they're doing that's different than others. There's other people who grew the product that goes into their edible. I would love to do the Pepsi challenge with any one of them and say there's not a single one of those that expresses itself in the same way that product would be if it was combusted. And I think that when cultivators see that and understand that we're not just saying it, we're committed to it. We're using their logo in our marketing very significantly. We're finding ways to collaborate with them, to work with stores that we're both in, to say, how can we show value to our store partners that's not about a race to the bottom discount? How can we create a unique experience for that audience? Through the process of getting to know our cultivators, that becomes something that for the right group is very exciting and it's something that they want to participate in. So yeah, it's not easy, right? Especially when you look at a market like New Jersey. New Jersey's got different problems than Colorado. There's still there's not enough product there still. It's very easy to, not, I don't want to say easy to sell. People are working very hard to do that. but it's not like Michigan or California or Colorado or Massachusetts where it's just a bloodbath out there. And it's like, every store you're climbing over sales reps to talk to the buyer. I think that knowing that our story was authentic and knowing that we were committed to doing it right has been very helpful for us as we built those partnerships.
How are things going in Colorado?
It depends who you ask, right? Like, so my expectations were much higher from a store count from where we're at right now, but we're growing. We're doing, I think we're in 30 some stores right now. We've got another 11 store group that said yes. So we're just waiting on that spot. And we have a sales channel called Sales Wins that just lit up a second ago. So I don't know that means we added someone. We only use that when we added a new store. So I think, in spite of the fact that the market is really challenging, that people are tired, that people have been through a lot, now that we've got placements and we've started to connect with an audience, we really understand how to reach the customer who loves this product. And the stores have been able to prove out that when you connect with that audience, it grows very rapidly and organically. There's a store that we were very excited to get in northern Colorado, and I'll call it a sympathy placement, in that there was a great relationship with our sales manager who's in that area. And the buyer said, look, I think this is a cool product. I love what you're doing. I don't know that you're ever going to find the audience who would want this. This is just so out there and different. I'll give you a sativa and indica and don't ask for anything else. We said, okay, cool. So they bought the sativa and indica. 2 weeks later, they had another order, exact same order, 1 case of sativa, 1 case of indica. 2 weeks later, they ordered 6 cases. And last week we shipped their 6th order, and we stopped in and they're like, you've got a very rabid fan base of people who found this because this is delivering a different high, because it's so, I think that Colorado's going great if you think of the fact that we've learned how to connect with the audience. We've learned how to work with our store partners to make sure that we're not only connecting with their audience, but also bringing in new people who are looking for this experience. And the sales data has finally started to prove out that this is a highly desired product. So in spite of the fact that we're at 30-ish, just 30 plus something stores right now, and I really hope to be in closer to the 80 mark just based on kind of what I thought our ramp up was going to be. The fact that we're seeing reorders and sales growth and new stores come on each week in a very challenging market, gives me a lot of excitement. One of my theories, and one of the things I'm hoping to test here, is that I believe unique and great can win in any market. Now, it might be harder in some, but we're intentionally in one state now, second state very different. We wanted to see a new state with a very hot market, and we wanted to see a legacy state with a very challenged market, and see what the difference in uptake would be. My belief is that the uniqueness of this product is something that will work in California and Michigan and places that have really struggled as well, because there is no competitive product to it. And so once you can reach that audience, it becomes this eureka moment of, okay, you're right, this is just a different thing. So Colorado's going very good. I've got a great team. They work very, very hard. I think that our store partners all certainly are seeing and responding to the fact that we are committed to working with them. It's not, my nightclub days, the most expensive thing on your shelf has nothing to do with what you paid for it. It has everything to do with how long it takes to sell. And, we've really constructed a team all the way from our CMO, who we brought in from, one of the strongest cannabis brands in the country. And she built their direct consumer audience, to the boots on the ground team that's in the state. People who are part of this team believe in the product and understand that if we just connect with the consumer, we're going to do great.
When you're trying to gain that exposure from a marketing perspective, what has worked in terms of getting people to try something new and unique?
Sure. No, I mean, it's challenging, right? Because I think edibles is one place where you see so much more loyalty than I think other products. And it has to do with the unpredictable nature of how they affect you. If you go into the store and you might be a heavy consumer, but brand A will affect you in the right way. Brand B probably treated you poorly or didn't treat you poorly, but didn't affect you the right way. So that trial is really what it's about. What we've learned is that there's a lot of audiences for this product. And so depending on who the store is and who their audience is, we lean into it a couple different ways. It starts first and foremost with the budtenders. We really want the education around this product is critically important. So we ask that every store we work with gives us time and access to their team so we can share the story of the how and the why and the what. From there, we then look to really drive as much trial as we can initially, to the point of, aggressively discounting or even offering, samples to the right audience who've proven that they are a fan of cannabis, right? The cannabis connoisseur is a big audience for us. Now, that customer understands terps and they understand grow styles and they understand cure styles. So we leverage purchases, people who've bought high quality flower or high quality hash, and we send them targeted offers, both with the store and from our own list. We do the same thing. We found that consumers who appreciate the nuance of flavor, if you would rather go to a great distillery and have a really well-constructed cocktail than just drink a bunch of Jack and Cokes, you're probably going to be uniquely interested in that. And that extends beyond alcohol as well. If you would like to go to a restaurant and know the name of the person who killed the cow and the cow was fed with grass, or what, like, that audience really appreciates this nuance of flavor and really gravitates towards it. We've also found that what I think is a really widely growing audience in America, the customer who will pay more to know what they're putting in their body. I'd rather go to Whole Foods as opposed to Albertsons. I'd rather go to the local well-constructed restaurant and pay a little bit more to know these ingredients than go to a Taco Bell. That's a huge part of this too. I mean, we've got no red number 5. There's no fake flavors. This is an authentic piece. So it really comes down to sampling. And I think the biggest audience and one that we've really done a good job of connecting with at our pop-ups, there's so many people who are terrified of edibles, and kind of back to that idea that from an ingestion standpoint, this is the easiest product to consume. From an experience standpoint, you're getting on the scariest ride in the park. And, you don't know, and I don't care how much of a consumer you are, you don't know where it's going to go. So we've really found that just getting to a trial perspective with those people has allowed us to really, build fast and quick believers. Once someone tries this, it's very rare that they don't. Our first product is an IPA. Not everyone loves IPA. We know that. We have a Corona with lime coming down the road that'll not be solely flavored by the cannabis. But right now, as we look to connect to that audience, it's just get the gummy, let them try it, let them understand what it is, and let them try it. And it seems like that is really all we needed to do to get the rocket ship going. I would say of the 31 stores right now, I would say 24 of them are seeing consistent sales growth. That hasn't worked everywhere, and some of that's demographic or geographic areas that just might not be the audience. And we're not the cheapest. We're starting with premium quality A buds, and we're paying a fair wage because I come from cultivation and I don't want to go through. I'm not trying to beat people up. So I think it's not an everybody product. Not everybody loves the flavor of weed. Not everybody's willing to spend for a premium product. But when we've been able to sample and connect to that audience, we found that the adoption rates are very fast.
Is there a way, given the nature of the product, is there a way to make flavor profiles consistent? And with the nature of manufacturing edibles, are there opportunities to do sort of small batch craft runs from some of those smaller growers that you find, or is that just not really viable?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, I'll show you. Sorry to jump off screen for a quick second. Again, so take a look at our package. The package on the front and the package on the back calls out who that cultivator is. And that QR code will take you the terp test from their flower and their notes on the flower, along with our notes on the gummy. So that certainly is the goal. And one thing that's been really fun as we've grown our footprint is now starting to talk to our store partners about, okay, who would you like to see here? Like what cultivations do your audience connect with? And who do you think is doing a good job? Because we've learned that there's so many unique expressions in this flower. We want to add more. We want to do a lot more. So I think we started with 3 partners. And actually, we started with 2 partners in Colorado. We're now up to 4, and we're talking about number 5. We started with 2 partners in Jersey. I was on the phone yesterday with hopefully who will be number 3. So, as we grow, and I think we'll see where the market takes it, but I'd love to get to a space where we find the right audience and, we're partnering with some really high-end grows and saying, hey, let's get a small amount of the flower you can keep on the shelf. And we know it's going to be a more expensive product, but we know we can connect with your audience and show it to them. I really think the sky's the limit there. And, also the next step of this, I said, this is the IPA. We are going to be doing a line that's got natural fruit flavors as well. So not fake flavors, but derived from fruit that complement the cannabis. And it's a unique thing because the cannabis drives flavor profiles. So you can't just say, I'm going to use flavor 1, 2, and 3, and they're all going to be that. You need to say what goes well with Keanu Reeves. Well, Keanu Reeves has got a really tropical kind of terpene profile. Let's touch that up with, mango. And so we'll start adding those small batches to the inventory in Colorado, hopefully May, and then Jersey will be about a month or so afterwards.
How closely do you work with your co-packer during the process, or is it is there a trust there that they're just going to deliver a consistent product, or is there a little bit of back and forth?
No, we're very much a startup that's still learning what we're doing. I'll give you an example. When we started this process, our process is really simple. We bring in the A-buds, we break them down, take out any stems, any sticks, any seeds, like you would if you were rolling a joint. Then we grind it. And initially we ground it like you would for a joint. And when you look at the gummy, you can see in it, I don't know if you've seen one of our gummies or not, but if you look at it, you can see little specks of pulp in there.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually ground cannabis. That's what's providing the flavor and the effect. Well, initially we were grinding it like a joint, and every once in a while you get a little bit on your teeth, and we found that wasn't super desirable. So we took that feedback, we went back into the co-packer and said, look, we need to find a way to make this something that nobody wants Scooby snacks when they're eating a gummy, obviously, right? So we refined the process, we increased the size of the grind, and then that ground flour is decarbed and then blended with azuca and water and then cooked down with a non-flavored pectin. So we're very involved. This is a startup, and we know that things aren't perfect out of the gate. A lot of what we're learning is we got to learn feedback from the audience, whether that's dispensary or consumer, and then determine, okay, that we understand the feedback. Is that due to us not communicating something that we need to change how we're marketing or talking about this product? Because we as core, we think that the product is very good, or is it something that manufacturing wise, they're right? You know what? Nobody wants a little flecks of weed on their teeth. You're right. I'm sorry. I should have known that out of the gate. Let's address that. Let's fix that. And so it's a very, very close relationship, because this is not something where, quality is unnegotiable for this product. And in order to achieve that, we have to have consistent, conversations, and we have to know what's going well. We have to know what's not going well. We have to know if the molds that we're using are effective from a time perspective, because, cost of production is something we've taken into account from day one on this product, after those really brutal lessons that I learned on my last experience. So I think that interaction with the co-man, I'm not interested in just handing anything off. I want partners who are going to care and do a great job and make a margin on it, and we can make a margin on it. And so we're all rowing the boat in a direction that's positive. That's our goal here.
Did you come up with that form factor, like the gummy that you just held up? Did you come up with that shape?
Yeah. So we went through, I can't take full credit for it. That was actually my director of operations, the one that did it. I signed off on everything. So technically I've been involved in all of it, but he's the one who really got his arms around and said, hey, how are we going to make this consistently? What problems do we have? What's the best delivery format? What's the size? What's the mouth, the toothiness, right? That's one of those things where you're never going to make everyone happy. Somebody wants a starburst, somebody wants something that's very soft. And so we took the approach of saying, okay, let's experiment with the different options and let's see what best expresses the cannabis. Let's see where we get the best flavors. Let's see where we get the best, mouthfeel. But yeah, we like that form. We like that hexagon shape. It's unique. It's not completely custom and different, but it's a unique form factor that we're going to keep consistent from state to state. So yeah, we're building the plane as we're flying it on some level, but we've got a very clear purpose of what we're trying to accomplish on the other side.
Before we look forward a little bit, I just wanted to ask one more question looking back.
Of course.
When you think back of your time at Veritas, do you think that you could have saved it, or was that just a wholly different animal?
So, well, yeah, the answer is yes, had we realized early enough. I think Veritas had a couple of things going for it. One of our investors had a very correct comment in one of our board meetings after we got hit from something from left field we weren't prepared for. And he's like, you don't know what you don't know. And so how would we have saved Veritas? I wish that very much earlier on, we would have found people who looked at things a different way than we did, instead of having the majority of the team coming, different skill sets, and everybody's voice was very valid, but we had a very similar direction we were looking at the problems from. I wish that we would have been much more aware of technology as it pertained to specifically production, whether that's garden or post-production, packaging, etc. I think one of the things that we were good at what we were doing, so we didn't see a need to change it. And we got surprised. We were the Colorado partner for Compound Genetics. Here's a little story for you that was really the eye-opening moment for me. We were the Colorado partner for Compound Genetics as they were launching. They had 8 partners in 8 different states, and this was some of the best gear that's out there, right? We were working directly with the team. It all come from tissue culture, beautiful, beautiful plants. I was in Las Vegas at a convention, and I ran into one of the partners at Compound, and he showed me an 8 of Red Bulls that had just been grown by a garden they were working with. And it was probably the most beautiful, still to this day, eighth of weed I've ever seen. Uh, great nose, beautiful. I mean, beautiful bud structure. It was the type of thing that no one would bat an eye. You'd be happy to pay $80 for. You want to show this off to your friends. Stunning. And we've been growing the same genetic and had not achieved any result like that. I mean, it was very good, but it was, oil and water different. And I said, I'm like, when you see that level of output, when someone gets it that right, how do you share that with the other 7 partners? And he's like, well, John, I'll tell you a little story. I've got 8 partners. I've got 7 of them who grow the same way. And then I have you. And so that was this eye-opening moment. And these are people who knew product. They knew weed. The 8 cultivators they had working were the top of their game in whatever state they were in. And so, that was really the eye-opening moment that technology had passed us in the garden. We went back and looked, and I realized that if you're doing crop steering, you need 1 gardener for every 2,500 feet. We had 1 gardener for every 300 feet. We had, 2 gardeners working 3 rooms. And it was great when we could afford to do that. So, had we had an eye towards keeping expenses down out of the gate, had we thought about things like, we looked at early packaging machines and we're like, these are terrible, these fuck the weed up, right? And they did. They didn't always. There's some great ones out there now. And, when we looked at, we were producing 200 pounds of 8s a week. We were selling all of those before end of day Monday. We had, it was a phenomenal product that we had a great connection with the audience. In order to achieve that level of packaging, we ran 2 shifts 5 days a week. We had a 7 to 3 and we had a 3 to 11 shift. And we had 20 people on each team hand packing every 8th. I say hand rolling. We were using future rollers like most people do, but still doing it all by hand. As if I was to look back on that and say, at that time when we were making money, we should have invested in a proper packaging machine. We should have invested in these things. Veritas will still be around, without a doubt. And one thing that I really enjoyed about my trips is I looked in other states and looked at cultivators. Both of our partners in New Jersey, phenomenal gardens. They do. I mean, they get it. They've been part of the product for a long time, whether they were doing that in the traditional market or whether they were doing that in other states. They also have a very business-like focused approach that their cultivation is efficient. They are using automation and machines where they should, and so they're keeping their cost of production down. They're positioning themselves. They know at one point the cost of weed in New Jersey is going to go down. It has happened everywhere. And so had we had more, I think, awareness of the fact that we were in a honeymoon phase and that it was going to end, we would have made different decisions. I also feel like we had such a great consumer connection. Our brand carried us longer than it should have. There was a time, it was about a year where I had sales reps, they were coming back and we were still selling through the weed, but they were like, I talked to XYZ at this store and he's like, thinks our prices are high compared to the quality he's seeing from other people. But we were still selling through because we had a great consumer connection. And I think at that time, had we really, I don't want to say taking that feedback seriously, we took it very seriously, but we did things like, okay, do we need to adjust our cure? Do we need to do this? What's our opinion of what we're doing? Had we been focused more on efficiencies at that time? Because you can be efficient and still care about the plant. I think that in our mind early on, it was like technology and efficiencies are for people who don't love the plant. And that's not true, right? That's just business 101. So yeah, we definitely could have made it. Had we known what we didn't know, we would have made it. And as I look at how people are spinning up in other states, it's awesome to see that many of them have a grizzled war veteran who came from Oregon or California or Colorado, who's been through it, and he saw the rise or she saw the rise and saw the fall, and they're taking those lessons into account now. And so, had we been thinking for the future, it's just the problem with a quick rise, you're ignorant. You get a little close to the sun, you don't think about the fact that, all right, wax is going to melt. And that's kind of what caught us.
Do you foresee getting back into the cultivation side of things, or do you kind of like, shopping around?
I mean, I'll tell you what, I love what I'm doing right now. I love to go through and meet with different cultivators. I also miss tremendously the ability to influence what genetics are being cultivated and to see the process from start to finish. So we're not writing anything out. I think that right now we're completely focused on the opportunity in front of us because the opportunity is huge. And I think that, like I said earlier, I think this is a disruptive product. And I also think it's the education around this product is so much harder than anything I've ever done because it is so unique and new. We're pouring ourselves completely into this. I would love to see a world. I've stopped thinking about federal legalization many years ago. I know a lot of people who've gone broke with the idea this is going to come on XYZ date. And I think we've all learned that there's so many things going on in the world. Legalization is not a big issue except for those that are involved in cannabis. And so, we want to focus on getting this product up and where it needs to go first. But if there's a day when you can ship across state lines, man, I sure would love to have a garden with some of our favorite genetics that we know work best. Of course, I don't think we'll ever stop working with others, because I feel like that collaboration is refreshing and it's exciting and it allows us to stay relevant with the customer. It also allows you to interact with people who are doing things different, right? Like they have a different approach to genetics or to nutrients. And I think the time with us being so focused on how we were doing it and then getting passed by people who are doing it other ways, I love seeing all the uniqueness of it. So yeah, I miss cultivation 100%. I would love to be, I think the absolute best way for our product to be experienced is alongside the actual flower we use inside of it. With some of the media we've been giving samples to me, that's the most eureka moment. If I give you an eighth of Lindsay Lohan flower and an eighth of Lindsay Lohan gummy, or a tin of gummies, and you consume those and you're like, okay, that experience tasted the same, felt the same, whether that was the duration of high or the type of high, that's the eureka moment. So would I love to take some of the gear that I think is just spectacular? Absolutely. And will we do that? I hope so. I think, but right now this is all about, we've got something unique that we need to share with the world. And there's plenty of good cultivators out there right now. There's no one else who's making this gummy.
Well, I understand that predicting things from a regulatory side of things is a bit of a fool's errand. But, what could we predict from, or what could we expect from Flower Union coming up?
So first thing first, we are going to, once we're getting stable on two coasts, right? So we're in Colorado, that's going well. We're launching New Jersey in April. We're very excited about that. And we're very excited to work with those consumers as we grow that brand. We've got our IPA gummy, which is out first. We're going to be introducing the second one, which is the Corona with lime. So fruit with the same kind of the same input ingredient. So fruit with cannabis not being the first flavor. We're in R&D and we're very close on a beverage. If you think about how Americans have learned to dose themselves socially with a glass of Chardonnay or a whiskey or a beer or whatever, the way that this product in the Azuka process allows it to affect you is very consistent with how it feels when you drink an alcoholic beverage. So, I really look forward to getting a beverage to market soon. I'm hoping for the summer. That is, I think, a true alcohol alternative. And then once we're able to establish those product lines in all markets, we're going. I think that we built this in a way that it's an efficient process that should be additive for the right production partners. And we're already talking to people in a number of states who are very interested in the product. And I think we, not wanting to get ahead of ourselves, we've said, look, yes, we're very interested in these conversations. I believe this product should be in all legal states as soon as we possibly can. We're working on R&D with a couple of hemp-derived Delta-9 groups as well, because I think that, especially on the beverage side, really great opportunity. But, we're not going to get ahead of ourselves. We're going to go through and do the little things right and make sure that we're connecting with that audience and growing. And so what do you expect from us? I hope that in 2 years you can find us in every market where we're available. I think that's an ambitious goal, but it's not very often that a truly unique product comes around. And, thanks to that time infusion technology and our understanding of genetics, I think we've got a great opportunity to do just that.
So were those your samples that Kim has been giving out at MJ Biz the last 2 years?
No, those were what they were putting together. Ours are a different form factor. We took a different recipe. Okay. As they were experimenting with that, they were making their own pectin, which is awesome, but that was a much more difficult step. There's a whole bunch of products in the process. We discovered a company that makes some of the best pectin-based formulations. They're either doing it for small batch boutique candy producers. They're doing it for large producers. They were really enthused about this product because they were like, that's just a wild approach. So, we've simplified it as much as we could, because what I think what we've added to the conversation we developed the brand and we developed the way we were communicating, but also got production processes to a place where they can be replicated consistently. And so ours are similar but different. Like they did more of a pâté de fruits. It was a very soft product. Initially came out with a 5 milligram, I think, on the flower driven one. We're doing 10s because we found that it's a flower high, so it's a different high than your consumers expecting to eat an edible. We'll do different milligrams as we go about, but similar, but different. I'll say that.
Well, John, thank you very much for taking the time. It has been a true pleasure learning more about yourself and Flower Union. Before we get out of here, is there anything else that you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience either knows about you or your work at Flower Union?
I think that my ask would be to not be afraid to try new things. Whether you've got a business and you think you do it the best way and you think you're the ship's never going to change, because I'll tell you, when those waters change, they change fast, and it's a tough ride. And like you said with Veritas, had we paid more attention to the tech and to changes, we would have lasted longer. And I think to the consumer, don't be afraid to try new things, because I think there's some really special products coming out there, and I think that ours is one, but there's a lot of others too. And I think that it's great to be brand loyal, but one of the really cool things about legal cannabis to me has been the ingenuity and the unique products that are able to come out now that we've got time to actually work on them, now that people can put that energy and share that information. So, it's still very early on in this industry, and I think you're going to see a lot more great stuff come out. So try new things in your business, try new things in your daily lives.
Well, John, thank you again for taking the time. Really appreciate it, and I hope we get to do it sometime soon.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. It's nice to do this too, and look forward to meeting you again soon.
All right, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. All right, for John Spadafora, CEO of Flower Union, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we will see you next week.
Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.